Discover Help presents Stress-Free Living with Ray Samich and Mr. Stress-Free, Ratanjit S. Sandhi. This audio program is an unscripted and unrehearsed conversation between Ray and Ratanjit. It is shared with you in hope of adding value to your life. We encourage you to listen to this program in its entirety to receive the full impact of its message. Sit back, relax, open your heart, mind, and soul to this edition of Stress-Free Living.
Welcome to Stress-Free Living. Thank you so much for being with us today. My name is Ray Samich, and I would like to introduce all of you to my longtime radio colleague and co-host, my dear friend and spiritual brother, Ratanjit Sandhi. Ratanjit, how are you?
Wonderful, Ray. How are you?
Excellent, excellent. And we are surrounded by our friends, so many people that are joining us live for this show, and that's part of our Zoom audience. If you'd like to be a part of it, visit our Stress-Free Living radio channel on YouTube. Just put that search in, Stress-Free Living Radio, and it'll give you a link, and you can join us every single week and interact with us during the show. It's one of my favorite parts of the show for sure. Ratanjit, the title of today's show is Letting Go. I'm sorry, why the fear of letting go. And this is something that I've really thought about a lot. I really think this is one of the core problems that I have, and maybe other people do, is that we know we should let go of certain things. We should let go of the things that we can't control. We should let go of the worries about the past, of things we didn't do or should have done, or didn't let ourselves make a right decision. But we know that we should just let go of that. We should let go of our worry about the future, because we know that the worry is not going to change anything. We should let go of people that no longer, for whatever reason, want to be in our lives. They've made a choice that they would rather not be a part of our daily life. There's so many things that we should let go of, but we don't. Our bad habits, we know they're bad habits. We know that we've got to stop doing those things, but we don't let go. I've thought that it must be a fear of it, because there must be some kind of an idea in our head, in our bodies, in our humanity that says, if I let go, it'll even be worse than it is, or then I'll have a bigger regret. So I wanted to talk about it. Why do you think we have a fear of letting go?
It's a very good topic. We, as you mentioned, there are certain material things we hate to let go, and there are some memories we hate to let go, and there are some regrets which we hate to let go. And all these things, they are basically come from our fundamental habit of not staying in the present. And also, we are part in our fundamental insecurity. When you take this young child, 2-year-old toddler, and he's attached to his blanket, and you take the blanket away and he cries, and somehow he has found his security in this torn up blanket.
Right.
So explain that. So we are basically born as we are looking for our security, and it's like being a chemist. I'm thinking as a chemist, you have heard of free radical. And free radical is a atomic structure which is deficient of a electron, and he's that always trying to find that extra electron from somewhere. So similarly, we are basically not parked in where we should be parked in. And nature has created this uncertainty so that we gravitate towards that final destination where we find our peace and our security. And until we find the peace and security, we are going to find the peace and security in things, in relationship, in memories, in our ego, which is saying, I should have done it better. So all these things are basically, we have not found the real place we belong to. Ultimately, it leads to our self-discovery. Until that self-discovery is made, we are going to be always attached to things and fear of letting go, right?
Well, that makes sense. And I think it gives us a lot to talk about. But you gave an example of the little kid with the blanket. And anybody who grew up with the Charlie Brown cartoons can envision, the little kid carrying around the dusty, dirty blanket, and it gives them the security. So we can all connect to that. But I'm not really talking about that because there is comfort in that blanket for the little kid. I know adults who have a favorite blanket, who have a favorite pair of jeans, that they're comfortable with, that they feel good in. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about letting go of things that we know are bad for us, that we know we shouldn't do. We don't want to let go of a bad habit, even though we know it's a bad habit. We don't want to let go of that major regret that we keep dwelling on, that wakes us up in the middle of the night. Why did I do that? Why did I do that? Those are the things that we absolutely know we should let go of. We know there's no value in keeping it, and yet for some crazy reason we won't let go of that. And again, I think it's a fear. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe this whole is a misnomer, but I think that there's a fear of letting go because of what will happen if we do let go. Maybe we don't want to eliminate that memory. Is there some security even in holding on to a regret? Is there some feeling that I don't want to change this habit, even though I know it's not good for me, but I get some kind of a good feeling out of doing the wrong thing? You know what I'm trying to say?
You know, there are different topics, different angles to look at it. When you look at certain habits you don't let go, whether it's smoking or worrying or constantly thinking about something. So once we form those habits, we talked about habits, we have done a show on habits. And habit, once is a mechanism given to our human body, which puts us on autopilot. And certainly it does not engage our critical thinking in when we are performing or when we are practicing those habits. So we do those basically in the autopilot mode. So that is why many, many wise, educated, highly intelligent people, you find them doing very stupid things because they have cultivated certain habits which they are unable to get rid of it. So to get rid of a habit, has to be replaced by another good habit. And you have to go through a systematic therapy or systematic procedure where you handle that. Otherwise, that's why when you get hooked on drugs or alcohol or cigarettes or any of these things, of course, there is a physiological side of this, and there's a you know, things which doctors can tell you that, certain things which invite you to do that. But ultimately, initially, when we form those habits, they are basically go into a portion of the brain which we call as basal ganglia. And this really controls, it gives us an asset. Certain things we do, like driving or thinking, or certain things we do which are important to us and make our life simple, make our life more organized. And because of those habits, we live our life many times basically because of our habits. And and unless you take a concerted effort to change a particular habit, it won't happen. So that is part of it. Certain portions you are talking about are habits. Certain portions are dictated by our insecurity. Certain portions are dictated by our greed. Certain portions are dictated by our ego, so on. So that's what conglomerate of all these things force us to do certain things which we should not do, and certain things we are afraid of doing, afraid of leaving, afraid of doing those things. So fear also plays important role in this. So it's a very complicated issue.
It is.
Right?
It's a good thing we have 3 weeks to discuss this, but instead we don't. We only have about 45 minutes of a program here to be able to try to understand this a little further. I think it's worth talking about because I think it does create unnecessary stress on us. And I'm intrigued by the fact that you just brought up all of these different things that you said, collectively impact this question. And I agree with you. I don't think it's simple. I want to say a habit is part of it. I do agree with you. We live our life by our habits so often. But I think this one is even deeper than a habit. I think, it's not like, smoking and drinking and drugs, those kind of things. There is some, I don't want to say it's a good thing, because all of those are ultimately detrimental to our health. But there is some immediate benefit that the people feel from those. There's either a high that they get that they appreciate that feels good to them, or there's some kind of a relaxation that they get out of smoking or whatever it might be. So there is some positive part of that, which is why they don't want to give that up. And it becomes a chemical situation and the way that their body operates. So even though I know those are bad and we agreed that those are not good for you, we kind of understand why some people still do those bad habits because there's some benefit. On the other hand, the things that I'm talking about again are things that we know have no value. Let's get and give me an example, give us an example. Let's say that I just had a terrible relationship. It ended terribly. I know there's no hope to continue with that relationship. It absolutely ended badly. And yet I will not let go of that relationship. I will continue to think that there's something there. I will continue to have a deep regret that it didn't work out. And that's on my mind constantly. There is no redeeming value to maintaining that. There's no reason why I shouldn't let go of that. And yet that type of scenario happens all the time. And I just gave one example. It could be anything. It could be a failed job. It could be a project that didn't work out the way you wanted. It could have been a loss of a stupid sports game that I thought I was going to win and I didn't win, or I thought my team was going to win, and I go on for weeks in agony because my team lost a game. It's, they could be big things, they could be stupid things, but there's no reason to retain that concern. There's no reason to retain that negative memory. I need to let go of it. And yet people can't. What do you think is the cause of that? That's not a habit, I don't think. What is the reason that we won't let go of bad things that there's no reason to keep going with?
You know, we can explain all these things. They are because of habit, because of insecurity, because of ego and greed and all these things. But if we really understand the solution of all these, whether it's bad habits or insecurity or our worries or everything, is the same, is the single solution. Because if we understand the solution, it's like habit. I explained in earlier shows a story of a person who was a chain smoker, and he would not give up smoking. And even doctors warned him that he was going to shorten his life and he's going to die. He said, I'm dying. If I die, fine. At least I'm enjoying my life smoking. But when he has the grandchild, he couldn't see the grandchild until he quit smoking. He did quit smoking. So certain habits can be corrected by a different uh, knowledge of who you are. Now, it's going to sound like a repeated, I'm like a parrot, but when you are, your computer, your mind is controlled by this human body, which is forever parked in insecurity because it has a fear of death. Forever nothing is enough. It is parked in greed. And because it thinks of itself as separate, it's parked in ego, and so on and so forth. So all our habits, all our insecurity, all our decisions are going to be made with those mindsets controlled by the human body. And the brain would give you excuses and reasons and all those things why you are doing what you're doing. But when you understand, when you know the truth about yourself, that you are not the human body, but you are the divine force which is living in the human body. And the divine force has no end, or is not going to die, is not part in scarcity mentality, is not think of itself as a one, separate things. It is, so it has none of those problems. So when your computer, your mind is guided by that force, you automatically see those bad habits as bad habits, you would correct them. You automatically see the insecurity are only illusions, and ego and greed and all that basically falls out. And you, even if you are alone, you never feel insecure. Even if you are, even if you are on the deathbed, you don't feel insecure because you understand who you are. So although it sounds like a theory, now please understand this knowledge of having this conversation, knowledge of knowing that you are the divine power living in this human body is not going to correct all those problems until you convert this mind into a habit of living in this mode of divine power. It's not going to correct that. So that is why most of the people who have read religious scriptures and attended these religious places, they have been told about this thing. And it has not affected them because you have to correct by the very thing which is affecting you. Habits are affecting you. So once you utilize your habit, power of the habit, and develop this habit of living in this oneness mode, living in this divine power mode, you will not be able to correct this. Right?
As you have said so many times, we have all kinds of knowledge. We're barraged by knowledge in our world today, but we don't live by our knowledge. We live by our habits. So we will move on to that when we come back. I'm also intrigued by still understanding if this is ultimately the habit that we can control, and if it is, then how do we establish and break through and get a new habit to replace this very bad one, this very meaningless one in our life of refusing to let go? We're going to come back with all of that and try to come up with some solutions. Thanks so much for being with us. This is Stress Free Living. We'll be right back. All right, we have a short window here. If anybody would like to ask a question, please do.
I appreciate the comments about letting go, but what happens when it's your kid that's addicted? Like, I listen to your comments personally, like if this is something that I am struggling with and what I can do to get over. But what happens when it's someone that you love that is stuck? The idea of letting go, if they are not open and receptive to getting help. How do you deal
Is
with
it from
that?
your
Good question.
is it
Good
from your
question.
perspective,
Yeah,
or are you?
You are a parent and you have a child with an addiction issue that is not open to getting help.
So how do you let go of that, or how do you convince them to?
The idea of letting go and being peaceful in the face of watching someone engage in self-destructive behavior versus
Got
jumping
it.
in, trying to control. And
Okay,
also,
thank you.
in my mind, it's like it's hard to watch someone engaging in self-destructive behavior, but it must be horrible for them to experience it. So my reaction is love them unconditionally, but it is very, very hard.
Thank you
Yeah.
for the clarification. I get it. We'll ask. Anybody else have anything real quick?
We have
I-
Sudarshan Sate with us. Hi. Sudarshan.
Go ahead, Doctor.
I was going to say, I'm glad she said it because it isn't just addiction or something like that. It can be you're with a spouse, you're with someone you love, and you see that they're mired in this something that happened years ago, and they keep bringing it up and bringing it up, and you want to say, let it go. But I guess what you're saying also is, do we have any ability to have them let it go just because we explain it? How do they sort of take ownership of letting it go? And whether it's addiction or it's just somebody who brings up family issues or whatever that they can't get rid of, and you explain why and how, but how do you get them to see the light, so to speak?
We are back on Stress Free Living, engaging in some wonderful conversations with our Zoom guests. And if you'd like to be a part of that, visit our Stress Free Living radio channel on YouTube, and you can get the link there so you can join us when we are live. Most Saturday mornings is when we actually produce this program out of a Cleveland, Ohio base. Ratanjit, great input there from some of our guests and our audience here that's part of our Zoom call. And I want to ask their questions. I don't know the timing if this is if we're ready to go to where they wanted to be right now. So I'm going to step back and then we'll get to their questions in just a moment. When we talk about something being a habit, then it is exactly what we do without thought. And the thought is the part of this that I want to talk about. I have a kind of a way that I get rid of. If I wake up in the middle of the night and if I have a thought in my brain that is maybe a problem that I'm engaging in with work, a worry that I have about something I didn't do, and I know it's going to keep me up worrying about it. So I displace that thought. I'll do something else that is positive. Maybe I'll go to a prayer in my mind, or maybe I'll go to a positive memory in my mind that was peaceful, or maybe I'll think of the ocean water, whatever I might I'll displace that negative idea and I can fall back to sleep very quickly once I've removed that in my brain. That's, I don't know if it's a trick or whatever, but it works for me. Okay. Can we all do that? I mean, is that something that we can do just by kind of developing a habit to say, your brain won't let go of that, so displace that thought. Take it out and put something else in there that you can control, that brings you peace, that brings you contentment, brings you happiness, doesn't bring you anger or hatred or worry. Can I know it's kind of like a little game or a little trick, but is that something that we can do?
Yeah, you're still parked in the same mode of body mode. If you like certain food and you know that particular food is bad for you, and or if you know your son or daughter likes that particular food and that is bad for them, so in order for you not for them to have that food, you have to replace by another food which they like. That's what you're doing in the street.
Right.
And we are still playing with your fear, greed, and ego mode. Or when we go to a psychiatrist or when we go to the treatment, we are all working around with the same thing. We are playing games with the same insecurity, fear, greed, ego, and all those modes. And we know when you feed somebody's ego, you have better incentive for that person to like you, right? So we say good words or good things to that people. Inside, we may think that he or she is a crook, but to obtain their goodwill, we praise them. So we feed their ego. So similarly, when somebody is insecure with less money, we give them more money. When somebody is so we are playing the games with all these things. It never would ultimately solve the problem.
Mhm.
Ultimately, solution to this problem is, there is another side of this. Youngsters today, we are trying to get them to change from drug habits or alcohol habits or gambling habits or whatever habits they have cultivated. And in their mind, when they saw their parents working hard and ultimately, the whole life cycle, they see the person is born and goes to school and college and learns and find a job and eventually struggles. And then what? Ultimately, you end up becoming old and die. So in spite of the millions of dollars you have accumulated, nothing helps you. So when you see this whole cycle in very small window, it is purposeless. And then you are leaving a legacy, you are leaving a name. You don't even remember our great grandfather's name. Everything is going to disappear people who have done great things, hardly anybody remembers them. So when you realize those things, it gives you a tremendous amount of disincentive to worry about. You want to drown yourself in alcohol or drug or something which is, get you away from this thought. So you cannot cure these things in the same human body mode, no matter how you try. Ultimately, once you realize that you are this power which is going to remain with you, and you begin to see every part of this universe is all that power. So we are, whether we see the trees or forests or animals, so they are part of this. So then end and beginning disappears. And the purpose of life becomes to serve that power. Because you remember the example, if this uncle gives you tremendous gifts every time he comes and he brings up gifts, and so the child is mentally always wanted to please that uncle. I wanted to serve that uncle. So the divine power has given us amazing things. This human body, which is amazing, which is a gift. So the moment your mindset gets away from this and accept this human body as a gift rather than as me, life changes. And then to serve this human body, serve this divine power which is present within the people we meet, within everything, within the environment, within the society, we begin to focus on utilizing this amazing brain power of creativity to add the highest value. And this is how we serve. And suddenly, when you focus on the creative energy of serving, finding new ways to serve, incentivize yourself to learn new things so that your capability to serve enhances, your life suddenly look forward to mostly positive things. And you will fluctuate from the old habit of body mode into the oneness mode, but slowly you cultivate this habit of living in this oneness mode and the power mode, and your computer, your brain is directed with this power mode and gets implanted in value adding mode, creative mode, which suddenly indirectly also feeds your body mode of ego once a while. So your body mode is very happy. At the same time, you're controlling the whole thing through staying in the human, in the power mode, universal power mode. Right?
So, Ratanjit, that everything we've talked about and everything you just added there is really about understanding this for ourselves, coping with who we really are, getting through this, letting go. But a lot of what you said talks about serving others and going outside of our own
not
needs.
serving others, serving that one power.
Serving,
that power
okay.
exists within you as well as everything else. So
Yes,
you begin to serve yourself. You begin to serve this human body instead of abusing this human body, because you are serving everything.
It's a very fair distinction, and you are right. That's what I should have said. So it's serving It's serving the divine power that is
Serving
within
one.
everyone, including me. Right.
Yeah.
Okay. But what it does is it does take me out of being self-centered, is what I'm trying to say. It changes my focus and say it's not all about me. For those of us who do think outside of our own needs and wants, and we are engaging in caring and serving others. So let's say we have a sibling, or we have a child, or we have a spouse who we deeply care about. We're not thinking about us, we're thinking about somebody else, and we see them going down a bad path. We see them addicted. We see them unable to let go of something in their life and their past, and our heart goes out for them. We want to help them. We want to engage them in what you've been talking about, understanding that it's not about their own personal feelings. It's about service to the greater one. But we see that happening, and we can't control them because they are a separate entity. And our, despite our love and our heart and our passion, we just kind of have to stand by and watch it. Or do we? How do we how do we let go of things that we can't control like that when they're so close to home? Are we called to dedicate ourselves to trying to get them to see the light? Or are we supposed to, you know, you know, just realize they're part of the greater one, and we can't control everything in that divine everythingness? What should we do in those cases?
You know, what happens is when we see our loved one, spouse or children, gets hooked into a bad habit and we want to correct that, the typical way is we are telling them, this is a bad habit, correct it. And we will do this better when you correct it. Whereas the only way to approach them is accept them, including their bad habit, and then slowly work with them to change their understanding and knowledge and ultimately their habit of living in the human body mode and living in oneness mode, because that is automatically going to correct them. But you cannot do that until you have done it to yourself. So that is the problem. We take this knowledge and suddenly approach another person to correct that and share this knowledge with them without developing a habit of practicing and living in this particular understanding and wisdom. So ultimate cure is, it is by improving, by putting myself into the oneness mode, I can change the whole world. Right?
We know, I mean, what you're saying, we know is true. We know that our kids don't do what we tell them to do, they do what they see us do. And anybody who, and that's not only true with parenting and kids, but it's true with anybody that we're trying to teach. It's like, don't be a hypocrite. You're telling me, you know, to stop smoking, but you smoke. You're telling me not to do these things, but you do it every day. So we know that that's true. I guess it's also true that we have to start with ourselves, because we are hypocritical if we're just doing that. But we, you know, what's crazy about that, Ratanjit, is that we kind of give up on helping ourselves. We kind of give up on fixing that, because we genuinely do care about the other person, and we really want them to be happy. We really want them to be fulfilled. We really don't want them to do the wrong things and potentially die young, or just be miserable in their life, or whatever it is. So it's kind of ironic, isn't it, that we don't do these things for ourselves. We don't change our bad habits and get into this proper mode, but we push it on others because we know that it is the right way. We know that it is the way that ultimately will give them happiness.
No,
It's kind of, mind-boggling to me how we skip ourselves, maybe trying to care more about others.
in my workshops and my seminars, the big one of the main thing which after listening to all this lecture, the people come and say, but Ratanjit, this is hard. It's very difficult to do. So when you say that, we are indirectly sending a message to this brain, this is hard for you to do. And brain suddenly discounts that I can live with where I am. Because it is really not hard. This is how the nature is designed to be in that mode. So basically, we have to understand we have to form a habit of living in this mode, number one. So now, in the last portion, you take a break and we will again discuss how to cultivate this habit of living in oneness. Right?
All right, I'm writing that down so I don't forget coming out of the break. This is Stress-Free Living. Good conversation today about why we have a fear of letting go, even when we know it's not the right thing to do. We need to let go. We need to let go and help others let go. How do we get this accomplished? We'll come back and hopefully wrap this all up. Thanks for being with us. We'll be back in just a moment. All right, everybody. Yeah, your time now. 90 seconds. Who has a thought?
I just want to circle back to what Ray said in the beginning of the segment, and Baisab, you talked about the solution. So Ray talked about having a negative thought, and he is going to superimpose a positive thought on it so that the negative thought disappears. In the relative world, is that not a step towards what you're saying? The oneness and all that, of course, is the ultimate goal. But like, for example, if you have a headache, in the moment, take Tylenol, Advil, feel better, and then continue the journey to oneness, or heroin, treat it with methadone, and then continue the journey to oneness. Is that workable?
We'll
Good
ask that
question.
question. Thank you. We'll do it in the show. Thanks. Anybody else? We still have 30 seconds. All right, it's okay. And I didn't mean to cut you off. I just wanted to give somebody else a chance here. But I think looks like we're coming back with that. I will ask that because I'm curious on that one too, actually. I would have hoped it was at least a step in the right direction. It works for me, at least for the night. All right. Nobody else has anything real quick? All right. Invite everyone to stay with us after the show. We'll be back with you in about 10 minutes for an extended conversation if you'd like. We are back on Stress-Free Living. Ratanjit Sandhi, yours truly, Ray Sandwich, with you, talking today about how to let go. Is it a fear that causes us not to, or what is it that doesn't let us get rid of things in our life that maybe we wanted to happen and didn't happen, maybe things that did happen that we want to let go of, whatever it might be, how come we can't let go? Ratanjit, I'm going to come back with a question that one of our great Zoom guests here asked. It related to something that I had said earlier, my personal experience, where I tell you, if I get a negative thought, I I force my brain to displace that with a positive thought. If I'm worrying about something, I say, stop, that worry doesn't do anything at all. Replace it with something in the moment that I'm very pleased with. I don't let myself dwell on negatives. It works for me. Is that a positive step that anybody can do? Or do you think that in the end run, that first step isn't a step that really will get you to where you eventually want to get?
It's a good question. There's a saying, books are written, and that if you want to be successful in life, you have to behave like successful. You have to dress like successful. You have to speak like successful. So, yeah, once you get into the oneness mode, which is a habit, we are going to work on this habit to get us there. But the other side of this is, once you get into oneness mode, what are you going to do? Your mind, your frame, your whole thinking is going to add value unconditionally, highest value in everything you do. So engage into that while we are waiting to develop this habit. So that is the aspirin you take. You have a headache. But while the doctors are working in curing the condition which is causing the headache, the aspirin which we take to feel better is to add highest value unconditionally any thought and action you do to everyone, including yourself. So you started adding value to not a person, but to the power which enlivens them. So suddenly you excluded yourself from the body mode driven brain abuses. Somebody calls you bad name in spite of you are doing good thing, you have to understand that person is still in the human body mode. So it's not his fault. He doesn't realize, or she doesn't realizes that they are the power within them. And that is why you ignore that comment and still unconditionally add value. Unconditionally means doesn't matter whether somebody appreciates or somebody is not. So value adding, we should do a show on that also. Adding value doesn't mean giving somebody coffee, or it can mean, but it not necessarily mean just doing the things which you think that person is going to. Right now, we help somebody only when by the things which would be appreciated. So you are feeding your ego in adding value. When you add value, engaging your oneness, which is ego-free, you really add value. Sometimes at the receiving end, that might not be looked at value adding, but ultimately that is what you end up doing. Right now, value adding is all associated with fulfilling your ego mode. So that is the difference, right? Before we go further.
Yeah, no, that all makes sense. And you added a couple of different thoughts in there, which were all good. The original question, though, and I like when you said aspirin, and so did one of our guests, they're kind of related to that. If we don't look at the aspirin as the solution, we just look at the aspirin as a temporary ability for us to continue to look for the solution. So it gets rid of the headache so that we can be back on the path, on the journey. It's like if we had a long journey across the country and we had to stop for food after driving for 10 hours because we needed the nourishment. The nourishment isn't the solution. The dinner isn't the solution to getting to our destination, but it allows us to get there because we have to maintain our nourishment of our body. So I like that. I like that analogy, even to the displacement of a negative thought, of a worry with something positive. It isn't the solution, but it is a temporary way for us to continue the journey to find the solution. I hope that I'm interpreting that right. So ultimately, the habit that we need to find. We've got just a few minutes left. What's your most concise way for us today to help us get that habit together?
To form any habits, one has to do that consecutively, repeatedly, and ultimately it would form a habit. So whether it's a thinking or whether it's doing anything, so to park your mind in the guidance of oneness, the supreme power, and you have to do this exercise every day, same time in the morning. So in religious sense, they call it prayer. Get up in the morning and pray to God. But pray to God, when you do that in the ego mode, you are only thinking of obtaining, bargaining with God. Okay, give me this. Thank you, God, for this. Thank you, God, for my daughter. Thank you, God, for my job. So you're not forming a habit. So what I said before many times is that pick up a time in the morning and you do repeatedly exactly at the same time. After you get yourself fully washed and cleaned and everything, and you are ready, and then find yourself at a place where nobody will disturb you, and there is a big, complete mirror in front of you. And look in the mirror, and then first thing you have to park yourself in the gratefulness mode. By looking at the human body, which is reflected in the mirror, you realize this human body is gifted to you. That is not you. And you realize the amazing things this human body is capable of doing, and which brings amazing gratefulness in your mindset, that I am very grateful the divine power which has given me this human body. And then after this exercise, continuing that, you close your eyes for a few minutes and then you open your eyes and look into your eyes straight, and you see the presence of enlivening force in you. And you bow to that force first and see that enlivening force, which is amazingly present in this human body, which is giving it life. Otherwise, this human body, in spite of all its organ and everything, is going to be a dead body. And the reason it is alive is because of the presence of this enlivening force. And after you are coming out of this exercise, you begin to see everyone else in their eyes and see the divine force in them. And you bow to them. This is by the old tradition of namaste in India. When they close their hands and bow, whenever you meet somebody, you bow to them. Basically, you are bowing to the divine power present in them, not to the person or the ego or their title or for anything. So when you develop this habit, it may last initially first hour, 2 hour, and second day it lasts more than an hour, and so on and so forth. And eventually, when you do this exercise every single day, and this becomes a habit of seeing the other person in this a different light of seeing as the power which enlivens them. And you have you have inborn internal incentive to serve them, to serve the power which enlivens them, not to serve that human being as your uncle, as your aunt, or somebody who you don't even know, don't even recognize, black, white, male, female. So you certainly do not distinguish other people by their human body description. You begin to
Ratanjit, I
see
have to
them.
cut us off. I'm so sorry, but we are at the end of the show.
Yes,
Remember, everybody, thank you for being with us. We're all playing the same game. We'll talk with you
thank
again
you.
real soon. All right, took it as far as I could. We had to go. We were overtime. All right, everybody, now it's your turn. If you would like to have any comments, I hope that I have interpreted your questions and comments
After today's
correctly.
show, I don't think they are going to come back.
If I didn't, now's your chance to ask the question the way you wanted it to be with Ratanjit. Please go ahead.
How about if I chip in now? We are off the air, right?
We are
Yeah.
off the air.
Okay.
But this is being recorded, by the way, and it is part of our YouTube posting. So your comments now, just so you know, with your permission, these are retained for others to hopefully learn from and enjoy.
So I think we are talking about a few things here together. I'm going to give you my views, of course. One is the category of addictions, drugs, certain medications, certain even food cravings, even though it's not truly addiction, but craving is there. That part, and to answer Kim, she was concerned about a child who is involved in addictions. Those, first of all of these habit changing has to be active process. I have, as an individual, a strong desire to change. By me telling anybody, people are certainly not going to change. You have to first make sure that that person has an active, strong desire to change. So, Kim, to answer your question, you need to develop confidence in that child that you are loving, you are there for their own benefit, and gain their confidence, and then instill in them a strong desire to change. And that's where the professional help is needed. In professional help for addiction, you may need the chemicals too, certain medication that will help it. But if you think you can, just by saying stop it, it's bad for you, it certainly might work if they develop strong desire, but it's a very slow process and a slow and active process. So I think we should keep those addiction categories is more in a separate bag. Now, coming back to Ray's wonderful questions, that he has worries at night, he wakes up like we all do and say, okay, I'm going to replace this passive thoughts with active thoughts. To me, I'm going to tell you my experience. You guys can change the way you feel is comfortable for you. I look at it in my mind and say, can I do anything about it? Can I do personally anything, or is it beyond my control? If it's beyond my control, there's nothing I can do. But if it's under my control, I should do it. For example, if I say something bad to somebody or something I did bad to anybody, that's under my control. I can call, apologize. I can reverse the process. I forgot to give him money. I can give it. Those things can be handled. But if I can't do anything, you have to put a reflective thought in there and just say, if I can't do anything, let's just move on with my life. And you may have to repeatedly tell your brain, like Ratanjit is saying, you have to tell your mind to accept it. And that's where you can bring your God, your divine power, whatever works, or prayers. So that's how I feel it, but it has to be an active process in a human body to change yourself. It's very hard to change ourselves. It sometimes may take months, weeks, or even years. And I still have not left some of the habits I have it. I say, for example, I don't know how many of you play bridge. When we play bridge, we make mistakes. And I'll say, next time I'm not going to make that mistake, and I still make it. I don't know why. So you have to repeatedly say it, that I'm not going to make it. You write it down, do other gadget things, but that's how you change yourself. So Ray, is there any other category you had that I forgot? I kept on writing, and you said so many good things I forgot. Is there something else that I missed?
I don't know. I'm so
Okay.
sorry. I don't remember what I say either. So I'm
No,
not
the
surprised you don't remember
question-wise,
what I
your
said.
worries that the things that you were pointing out initially, that were
Maybe it'll come
questions.
to you as we get some other feedback,
Sure.
maybe it'll come back to you.
You
Is there
know,
anyone else that would like to comment?
Dr.
Or
Mehta,
Ratanjit, do you want to
Yeah,
respond first?
Sure.
uh, you had very good. You are a doctor. Your knowledge and your experience is highly regarded and respected in this audience. And the only comment I have is that there is a in the effort of doing your ultimate best is always trying to improve your best to better. You know, if you are really honest with yourself, and if you want to do your best, you have to utilize every ounce of the education, experience, and resources you have to do your best. If you have done your best utilizing all these resources, what else is there which you can use to improve your best to better? That's a question which reflects to you that if I can't do anything, then I should accept it. So there is a force within you which is beyond the knowledge, beyond the experience, which if it is engaged, that is how you elevate your best to better. And we are not taught in our education, in our entire life, to utilize that power. And that power within us ends up doing something which we call as impossible. There have been examples in our human history when somebody, your doctors, your experts, and somebody said nothing we can do, you are going to end up dying this disease. And this person has a mission and he wanted to do something, and he reached out to the inner self, or somehow or other, he find himself to be cured. And that is beyond our explanation. We don't, our society does not accept that and is considered as miracles or whatever it is. But really, the real miracle is within us. And once we tap that miracle, that power within us, we can utilize that. So I'll give you one of my personal example. My hand, my left wrist was broken, and it was broken into several pieces. And I was invited by this entrepreneur in India who had a yacht, and she wanted me to be the guest, and this was all amazing chefs and everything. But once I went on the boat, and any movement will cause pain in my hand. So suddenly I reached out within myself and disconnected this hand from my body or the senses. And for the rest of the night, I danced and everything without feeling any pain in my house, in my hand. And I cannot explain how I did that, but that is all possible. I had a grandfather who once had a major operation done on him without anesthetic. And this was unbelievable. So all that is possible. We have heard the stories, and this is all, that power lies within us. And this exercise which I talked about will allow you to get in touch with that power. And it is, if nothing else, you would have a new experience given to you while you are alive.
You're absolutely right. And I vouch for what your comments you are making. In medicine, those of you who believe only in medicine or science, it's one of the things that's called self-hypnosis that we can't explain. And we have all, as physicians, seen patients with a strong, pure desire, like you said, you have a power within you. They show unexpected recovery. There are often cases reported where patients have been declared brain dead for 2 months or 3 months, and they suddenly wake up. So these powers exist within all of ourselves, and that's your expertise of connecting with a, God or with a one source of energy that we all have and as a resource, and we should connect it to them. This is more mortal thoughts that most of us, how to deal with it, day-to-day activities. And when I said it, we need to say in our mind, is there something I can do about or not? Just like Ray was saying, if a football team lost, I said, can I do anything myself? No. So I tend to forget it. Like you said, positive thoughts. People have a fear of flying in planes. And when they sit down, you have to say, can I do anything to prevent it? No, you have to relax and let it go. You can't just say, I'm going to die because plane is going to crash. You are not the driver. You're just a sitting passenger, passive. And you can't do anything about it. So ordinary things, what you talk about, Ratanjit, is way higher level thoughts, and those exist. There's no denying to it, and they are ultimately helpful. Like Sudarshan said, you take an aspirin, and that's what it is. It's an aspirin saying, can I do anything about it or not? But ultimately, you have to go and seek positive thoughts with God and connect it, or try to connect it. But you are absolutely right. I would not deny it at all. I'll be silly to deny it.
So Darshan, you had a comment, we cut you off.
No, I think I got the one thing that I get in this program with you, Bhai Saab, is that the challenge comes down to getting ourselves unparked from the body mode and parking ourselves in the oneness mode.
Exactly.
And you repeatedly provide the pathway about forming this habit, about looking in your own eyes in front of the mirror. And I would like to encourage all of us to really try it. And I think we could probably all benefit from it, and then we can speak a little bit more in depth about it once we have tried it, and we can say I had this issue, that issue, or whatever. Or
Exactly. We form a group of people who would try that exercise every day and see the progress and the hurdles we face.
Yeah, because otherwise it's all the problems we discussed, these are body mode, and we have to get to the oneness mode, and you have shown us the path, and I think we need to walk on that path. Is my my comment.
Thank you.
One of the things that I remember you have said many years ago is that there are no miracles. Miracles are low probability events, and we just don't understand how they came about. But once we call it a miracle, we put it out of our mind that this is beyond our comprehension. But there is a pathway to a miracle happening also, and it involves your inner self or center, or connecting to oneness.
Excellent.
But I think that in order to really get value from what you are saying is to do it, and is to do this practice.
Ratanjit, is this similar to yogic exercises or yoga that people talk about in India? I've heard it, but I've never practiced it.
There are many ways to do that. Meditation actually walks around the same path. This is kind of a meditation, which is removing all the thoughts and focusing only on oneness.
Yeah.
And but it is kind of we are used to seeing something material when we have a picture reflected of our body in front of us. Because you are right now in the body mode. So you have to utilize the body mode to help you migrate into the oneness mode. The body mode is going to see the human body and all the properties associated with that, which is going to go through your mind, and ultimately the greatness feeling is going to come about, and eventually when you close your eyes and then you see this power within you, first day or second day you may not feel much, but eventually when you begin to feel this thing, when you begin to do this exercise, you will have a better chance of migrating from human body mode into oneness mode.
Yeah, and it is yoga. It is absolutely yoga, because the literal meaning of the word yoga is that which connects.
Unification. Yoga means unification.
Yeah, so that which unites, that which connects, that which yokes you to the infinite. So this is very much that.
Sahil, youngster, you are the next generation. We must hear from you.
Thank you, Dada. Firstly, thank you so much for this amazing conversation and the anecdotes that you shared and the daily habit that you shared. Those were really interesting. And I do have a question, and I'd like to seek your advice on a personal problem. And I really hope that I don't go beyond the scope of this topic with this question. So here it goes. So my grandma, she battles with blood cancer, and she's been battling with this disease for about the past 10 years. We all love her dearly, and as a family, we've accepted the fact that she's not going to be around with us forever, and that she has a limited number of years with us. However, this sad reality is quite hard to accept for my grandfather, and quite naturally, he has a deep fear of losing her, and he does not ever want to let her go. And I've seen in society, there are many examples that old couples that have been together for an X amount of decades, after one passes away, the other eventually just perishes with time. So how do I help my grandfather in this situation and not allow him to perish?
You know, it's like a particular suit you wear. If we all went to moon and we cannot see each other without the spacesuit, and our identity becomes a spacesuit, and eventually you get attached to the spacesuit, but spacesuit has limited life. You have to change that. So basically, your grandfather has to realize his attachment to the spacesuit of the grandmother. But the real grandmother is not going to die. She's going to be alive, and so is he. So when we basically extend this human body and we consider as the human body as me, we are basically putting ourselves to experience pain and suffering and partitions.
Right.
So migrate away from this pain, sorrow, and suffering is migrating away from this human body mode into oneness mode.
Right. Thank you for this. I mean, I'll try my best to translate this thought to my grandfather. Although he considers himself to be a spiritual man, I will try my best to convey this.
The people, when we consider ourselves to be spiritual, we worship God. So basically, it's duality. God exists somewhere and I exist here.
Yeah.
So neither God remains nor I remain. So this audience is basically understands Hindi. Let me recite a poetry. सत्य को परम मानते हो, खुदा में है तुम्हारा विश्वास, अरे यकीन मानो ना सत्य कोई मन्नत है ना खुदा कोई विश्वास, सत्य तो हमेशा एक ही है रहा, वो सत्य ही तो है खुदा। जब तुम खुदा को सत्य से अलग करके मानते हो या पूछते हो, यकीन मानो ना सत्य रहता है ना खुदा।
Wow. That's quite interesting.
Do you understand what that means?
Yes, I do understand
Good.
Hindi quite well.
Wonderful. Good.
I
For
did
those of
get
you that
part
do,
of it.
I'm so excited for you. Unfortunately, it's just beautiful.
Sudarshan, can you
Yeah.
translate that into English?
Yeah, what it means is that if you separate truth from God, then you lose both, because truth is God, in summary.
Beautiful. Can I also add, and I'm not coming from Ratanjit's spiritual place on this, Sahil, but I've just had so many occasions where I was at somebody's deathbed. Believe it or not, as recently as last Thursday, my wife and I were the last person to be with a very dear friend that passed away. 30 minutes before he actually gave in is when we were there, the last people to be with him. So this is a topic that is very near and dear to me. There's two different paths that I have engaged with people in this mode. One is that if they've just lost a loved one, and some of the people that I've been with, that has happened. They were with somebody 50, 60, 70 years together, and then they're suddenly now alone. And what I have shared with them is I've said, our life is just a blink of an eye compared to eternity. So if you're thinking about being with your wife because she just passed and you're saying you can't live without her, just keep in mind that in relative to eternity, it's just the quickest blink of an eye and you'll be with her again. Okay, so your time isn't done yet. God hasn't taken you yet. Your time is still here to still do meaningful things for people that love you and that you love. And don't worry about the fact that you can't be without her, because the period of time you're going to be without her is just the blink of an eye relative to eternity. So if God gives you more months or more years, you need to take that and add value to it. That has been something that I have spoken to that I really think has helped people to separate the fact that they can't live with anybody, can't live without anybody. And then there's one other thing I want to share, and this happened in my mother's life. My mother was quite ill at the end, but she was such a strong-willed person that she didn't want to let go. She did not want to let go. And each one of my brothers and sisters came in and says, Mom, it's okay. You're very sick. It's okay. You've done such great work. We love you. We're at peace. Go with my father, who had passed many years earlier, and be at peace. And she wouldn't let go. And a person came in from a hospice and talked with her. And within 5 minutes of that conversation, my mother passed. And so I went to that woman and I says, what in the world did you tell her that all of her kids couldn't tell her, that she wouldn't listen to? And my mother was of great faith, very, very deep faith. And she told her, she says, don't you have faith that whatever isn't done will be done as God wants it to be? And my mother said, yes. And she says, well, then let it be in God's hands. Okay, God will take it from here. You don't have to fight it anymore. You've done your part. Let God take it from here. And that put her at such peace that she let go. Whereas, even though we told her that, she didn't believe it. But when someone told her that, it worked. And I don't know, Ratanjit, if either of those thoughts I've just shared, fit into your ultimate thoughts on this, but in the real world, both of those were very, very meaningful to me, and I've shared those with others.
Thank you for sharing us with this. It's a great quote.
Yeah.
It's a great quote. Sahil, I have a quick aspirin for your grandfather. Of course, ultimate answer is Ratanjit gave you. It's a wonderful answer. But the aspirin is the same. You just tell your grandpa that instead of worrying, spend more time in loving her. Spend more love with her now, so much so that when she leaves, he would not regret that he did not enough love her.
Absolutely. Thank you.
That's just the aspirin.
In one of my conference, one of my workshop, at the end, one guy in his 65 or 70-year-old man came to me. He said, all these things are great and everything you are saying is wonderful, but I lost my son in his prime age. He was 35. I cannot get over that. So how do I do that? So I said, your basic fundamental thing was that you enjoy the love the feeling of love to be around your son, right? I say, yes. Basically, you are missing that feeling of love. And that feeling of love can be created by adopting an orphan. And you express the same feeling of love with that child who needs love. And your pain will be reduced. And that's what he did.
Nice.
Can I jump in here for a second?
Sure.
So going back to the earlier question about son and addiction, and I pointed out that sometimes someone you love, in a sense, can't let it go. And through all this, ultimately, it sounds like, just like we've talked about before, you can't control somebody else's behavior. Ultimately, all you can control is your own behavior, and hopefully act in godlike ways, and hopefully they see it, because it sounds like instruction to that person doesn't help and will prove fruitless. So that's my first comment. My second comment is a little bit more jovial, which is, these are two separate thoughts. So you're telling me all these people go through procedures without anesthetic. So that means, as a dentist, I can now treat people without anesthetic. How's that going to go over? I'm just kidding on that. Obviously, we need anesthetic for most people. But maybe we need to address that first point, where we can control our behavior and not others. And maybe that's acceptance. I don't know.
I think that is correct. Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead, go ahead. Go ahead, sorry.
No, in a text in Indian philosophy called the Gita, there is one this profound insight that all you control is what you do. But I think the next step of that, because I think a lot of people talked about not being able to let go. You have to understand that the other person is a sovereign human being, a form of God, and they have their own trajectory. And you have to respect that trajectory. You are not going to impose your will, your ideas, you can discuss, you can consult, but ultimately the other that we have talked about in this scenario is also a fully sovereign human being.
Absolutely.
Anybody else have a quick thought here? Sana or Kim?
As a mom, wanting to, feeling guilty, feeling responsible for always showing up to solve a problem or give direction. And then when a child is an adult, obviously you're not managing their life that way. When I have been most terrified, I immediately go into prayer, and I stand on the platform of trust, love, and faith. And I just say, I love them, but I don't own them. Like, God blessed me with them. And I believe God loves them more than I do. So I just have to trust that however it turns out, it's in God's will. And that's how I keep peace in the face of uncertainty or imaginary fear. And the ego, it's all about me, that their behavior is a reflection of me, good or bad. It's neither. So it takes something to come back and to just be. That's my version of letting go. But the feelings, if I am not intentional about being prayerful and meditating and having faith and trusting higher power, boy, fear can really, I feel like I'm a wrestling match getting beat up, and some of it is imagined, some of it is real, but some of it is imagined. But it goes back to ego. When fear is present, love is not. So I'm grateful for all of the comments that were shared today. Thank you.
I agree with you. The only thing which I don't agree is there is no higher or lower power. The moment we say higher power, we segregate one, and we create duality. There is only oneness. There is only one power which is present everywhere. Everything is that power. And once we begin to see that power in that form, we begin to, we are never not in touch with that power.
Thank you. I also have one other thought that what I appreciate, you use that word appreciation in this conversation today. I noticed that what I appreciate has a way of appreciating. That's a beautiful word to on to.
Steve, go ahead.
Oh, so I unfortunately need to leave. Ratanjit, you're host now, so you can keep this going if you want to. But I unfortunately need to leave this discussion. We are not here live next week. We will be back live here on our Zoom call on the 10th, February the 10th.
I think we are
But I'll let
almost
you.
done until anybody has any more questions.
Haven't heard from Jogesh or Sana, but maybe they don't have anything. But I do need to go.
Very interesting thoughts today. And in the last a week or so, I had been listening to another webinar wherein the power of subconscious mind was being discussed. So I find a lot of similarity in what Mr. Ratanjit has said about oneness, as usually he says about invoking the God power or the almighty power within your own self. The practical way of doing in that webinar, it was being discussed. Whatever impressions you gather in your conscious mind and you imprint in your subconscious mind, then those positive thoughts get rewarded and they become 10x. And the subconscious mind is so strong, it works like a servant and delivers. And I have seen in one case in my family, my father survived an accident and he lost maybe 3-4 ounces of blood. And he maneuvered to come back to home over a distance of 200 kilometers. And then he was treated after 12 hours. There was blood shortage, but he survived. And that was the miracle, I would say. Whereas we lost him later on in a coordinated surgery by a doctor in the hospital. But he survived because of his willpower that saw him through that he survived. And he was treated by a doctor and blood transfusion took place after about 12 hours. So there is some power. And he had managed his whole coming back to home from an outside makeshift arrangement. There was some first aid given by a field doctor, but the surgery took place after 12 hours. So there is some power in the subconscious mind if it invoked helps you out and you feel that you have made your way in life. I also personally in my career certainly was sometimes engrossed with a lot of targets. But then I gave everything up and then said, oh God, asking to invoke the power, let me go through this. And with daunted efforts, I went through and was quite successful. So I think the impression in your conscious mind has to be continuously updated. So your subconscious mind is recharged and it comes back with all your. Thank you.
Thanks for sharing.
I would like to express gratitude for the wonderful session we had today. And the only way I have learned is take each day as it comes, living in the present moment, as was taught by Ratanjit ji in one of his sessions, and try to add the highest value, whatever I can in my best capacity on a daily basis in each and every action. This is what I live in the moment, and this is how I approach life. But wonderful to hear different experiences. It really adds to our bouquet of knowledge and wisdom. Thank you.